So Student Build-a-Thon, what is it? This was inspired by Inductive Automation's popular Integrator Build-a-Thon. So this is held annually before and during our Ignition Community Conference. And this is a live challenge. 2 teams go head to head and the audience votes on a winner. The work is serious, but there is plenty of humor involved. If you have not seen a Build-a-Thon, I would suggest you go to our YouTube channel for Inductive Automation and search for Build-a-Thon. So we couldn't let the integrators have all the fun. So we offered a similar challenge to students nationwide in April. This was a remote challenge with only 72 hours to build. We gave them the project requirements on a Friday, and the submissions were due Monday. We also threw in a twist on Sunday morning. The teams were made up of 1 to 4 students. They had to be actively enrolled at an academic institution. We also asked that 1 team member was credentialed in our inductive university. Every year, Build-a-Thon Challenge has a theme. And this year, we asked the competitors to build an interface for an automated fast food restaurant. After our judges reviewed each submission thoroughly, it was the team from Clovis Community College, Clovis Crush, based in Fresno, California, who claimed the title of the first Student Build-a-Thon winners. Our runner-up was the Ignite team from the University of Kentucky. Congratulations to our winning team members. Also, a huge shout out to all the teams that participated. We had a fantastic turnout and we hope to make it even bigger next year. And speaking of next year, yes, we are bringing Student Build-a-Thon back. We're already gearing up for the next round, and trust us, it's going to be even bigger. One of the best parts of today's webinar is that we're going to take a deep dive into this year's winning project, not just to show off what made it awesome, but to give all of you future competitors a serious leg up. We'll break down the strategy, the design, and the extra touches that made it stand out. So if you're thinking about throwing your hat in the ring next year, pay attention. This is your blueprint for building something bold, competitive, and totally next level. So in this challenge, every team stepped into the role of a CTO for a next generation fast food startup. The mission was to build a fully automated restaurant system that's not just functional, but disruptive, cutting labor costs, driving revenue, and delivering a seamless, mouth-watering customer experience. This project required 5 distinct pages, each with a specific criteria. So we'll get into the details throughout the project, but generally this is the app they had to create. First up, the order interface. This is where our end user is going to interact with the system and order their food items. We kept the menu simple. They just had burgers, fries, and shakes to choose from. And after placing the order, we wanted the customer to see the order in progress. Next up is our inventory interface. This is for our backend management to track all the inventory we're burning through on a daily, weekly, and monthly basis. Then we have our alarming. We want to be able to see the alarms in our system, and we ask the students to set alarms on inventory levels, so we would know when specific items are getting low and need to be ordered. Then we have our trending. We want our restaurant owner to see where the company is trending from the operations side of things as well as revenue. And finally, navigation. This is, of course, where you navigate between the pages of the project. Finally, we provided UDTs, or user-defined types, to our students, and these act as a state machine. Each process, creating the burgers, fries, and shakes, has its own steps to go through to create that final product. And we wanted to make this part consistent across the project so everybody starts from a good baseline. Now, what would a project be without scope creep? We know in the real world that customers always come up with a new requirement before a project is finished. We let our students get to work and then we reveal the twist. Each item has a price and we ask them to sum the revenue over the orders and track this on the inventory management page. We also asked for a reset function for the revenue. And with that all behind us, Reese, would you like to walk us through the winning project?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for going over those project requirements. It's always good to have a little bit of background for what we're about to see. But let me pull up the winning project here. Um, so this is the winning project that the Clovis Crush team has created. And you'll notice on the left-hand side over here, there's four primary main parts to this project. And these are the pages that I'm going to walk through initially here. So we're on the order interface page, right? And you can imagine this is where you'd maybe walk up to a kiosk. You may have you may have done that at a fast food restaurant where you have kind of a self-service kiosk. But that was kind of the intent of this order interface. It is customer facing, right? It's something that they're going to use. And so, of course, making it seamless and easy to use and all those types of things was very important. But you can see this Crush Cafe, as the Clovis Crush team has called their restaurant. Um, you can have a burger, you can have fries, and you have a shake. Of course, these are the project specifications that Mara just went through. And so we can absolutely add burgers, we can add fries, we can add shakes to this order. Now, some of the things that I like about this is that you can add multiple burgers to this and you get a subtotal right here on the right hand side for each individual item, right? Additionally, we also have a total sale price that's being calculated in real time as well. If we were to drop this below, or I should say, if we were to drop it to 0, the UI only allows you to add a burger rather than subtract it down to the negative, right? Obviously, adding or ordering a negative burger doesn't make any sense. So that's a really nice added feature to just minimize the amount of error that the user could introduce to this system. Canceling out the order down here at the bottom is going to zero all of these items out, right? And we can start over. We'll go ahead and add one of each here. And once we've decided that, hey, this is what we want to order, we can absolutely start that order. Now, when we start this order, the intent and the idea, the project specifications behind this was I want the end user to be able to watch the progress in real time, right? But we, of course, don't have real piece of equipment creating this. And so the idea here was to create a state machine with those UDTs to be able to use as visualization for this product being made. So the Clovis Crush team did a really great job of showing that progress bar, right? Of this item is in progress. Here's the stage that it's in. And then we have a let's eat button here that when we click it, it's going to cancel out that or close out that order once it's been finished, and it's going to be ready for that next customer. So those are some of the really nice things that I like. What we also wanted to do during this is talk about some of the things to consider, right? Some additional features to add in there, because some of you may be competing in the competition next year, just to give you an idea of maybe some of the things that you could include in that project. So let's go ahead and I'll go ahead and add these. Really, I love this interface. I don't really have a ton of improvements to make. The team did a fantastic job, but on the start order page here, the order progress page, what I would probably do here just to add yet another item for visual enhancement here would be to add an icon or an image of placing a tomato on that burger, right? Placing that top bun, etc., rather than just the progress bar. The progress bar is great to be able to see that that item is in progress, in fact, but it would be nice to have the step of which we are seeing rather than just the text there. And that's the order interface. Simple, intuitive, and for that end user to use, which is honestly, it's exactly what you want for that type of customer facing screen. Moving on to the inventory management. So the inventory management, of course, is where we can manage our inventory, just as the label says there. We also have the ability to look at the revenue of the products that we have created and how much money we've made. So some of the things that I like about this screen, right? We've incorporated icons here, not just text and labels, right? But we've reinforced that visually with icons as well, so that we can not only read it, but also visually see what we are increasing here. So we can absolutely increase the amount of inventory we have with these easy to use buttons here. We can also say we got a huge order of 1,000 containers, right? And it doesn't seem out of the picture for an actual restaurant. We can also type into this and hit enter, and that will update that value as well. So you aren't getting arthritis by mashing the button on the mouse 1,000 times to increase that inventory. So some really nice features there. Plenty of space, right, visually, to see that there's separation between the revenue section, there's separation between the inventory section. It just visually separates those two different items. Some of the things that I would improve on this screen, right? That's one of the things we want to talk about on this webinar. There's always room for improvement. But what I would do here is, and we haven't really talked about this yet, but there is an alarm set for if inventory goes below 5, right? So the cups should be an alarm right now. In fact, when we go to the next page over here, the alarms page, should be able to see that there. But what I would do is I would add a visual indicator, maybe change the text color to red or the background color of that label to red, or something of that sort, just to indicate here that we are low, in fact, on that piece of inventory. So that's one thing. Another thing that I would do is add a little bit of padding up top here. So that'll separate the inventory section, that border, from that top navigation bar. Maybe even the same padding distance, same pixel width as what we see between these two inventory and revenue sections. Okay, so that is the inventory management section, and then we have the alarms, and there we go. In fact, we do have cup inventory is low here. And so a couple things that I like about this, obviously it's taking up the whole screen, right? We're using, this is part of the project specification, we're using the alarm status table to build out this screen. And so a lot of this functionality is just built-in functionality, but the fact that we expanded the alarm status table component across that whole view is great, using up all that real estate. As well as, of course, we can acknowledge that or interact with this alarm there as well. One of the things, obviously, there's not a lot of room for improvement when it's literally just a whole component on one page, right? But one of the things that the Clovis Crush team did was add this clear time section or column to the table as well. So that's a really nice added feature, just to be able to see when that alarm was cleared, when we have enough inventory, right there on the alarm status table. Moving over to trending. Obviously, this is a way that we can see how the different inventories are trending, and that was part of the project specification to historize the value of our inventory. And so you'll notice down at the bottom we have lids and we have cups inventory, right? So we're seeing that drop there from 4 dropping down to 2 when we put that order in. Well, it was about 5 minutes ago. And so a couple things that I like about this view, right? Once again, we're taking advantage of the full space of this view, right? Taking up all that real estate. And although that was a part of the project requirements, another thing that they did as well was change the names of the pen here from the default tag path to the specific, kind of more human readable name, right? Part of the project requirements was to initialize this power chart with lids and cups inventory when you open up the screen, but they went ahead and added the, more of a, like I said, human readable name to these pens rather than just the tag name. So a lot of little things, right, that the Clovis Crush team did a really great job of, and that's really what kind of pushed them over the edge here. So that is the core of the project, right? There's a lot of other smaller project requirements in the designer, and we don't really have all the time in the world today to talk through every single detail that they did in the background. But next up, I want to talk about how this project was graded. And so for that, I'm going to switch back to our slides here and continue on to talk about this project from the judging side of things, right? So how this was judged was once the teams completed the project, of course. Over here at IA, we had a team of judges. I think there was 6 or 7 of us judging different parts of this project. And so we got quite a wide variety of folks from different divisions, different backgrounds, so that we tried to make it as complete of a judging process as possible here. And so what we were judging were, as you can see, this is the breakdown of the different categories here. So the order interface, it was weighted the heaviest at 20%. Obviously, we wanted to see a fast, intuitive, and user-friendly way to place and track orders. Inventory management came in at 15%. Of course, that was about giving the manager the ability to track and see the inventory. Trending and alarming both sat at 10%, focusing on the ability to visualize performance over time, flag problems quickly, those types of things. And then design and color scheme, 10% for making things not just functional, but also clean and visually cohesive. Mobile responsiveness, 5%. Security and user roles were another 10%. HMI operability and UI maneuverability. And this might kind of seem similar to design and color scheme, but this was more about system smooth, how smooth the system was, intuitive, and how intuitive it was for that end user to use, how accessible it was, those types of things. And actually, I'll mention Mara's going to be talking about the design, color scheme, mobile responsive, security, all the kind of the 4 last ones there. And she'll dive in a little bit more about what that means. What does HMI operability mean? What does design and color scheme mean? Just to give an idea of some of the best practices that we see out there in the wild. And then finally, the last one there, the twist, right? 10% dedicated to that surprise element. As like I like what you said there, Mara. There's never a project that doesn't have a little bit, at least a little bit of scope creep, right? You get halfway through the project and the end users, hey, I want to add this or that or the other thing. So I wanted to add a little bit of that element to mimic the real world with that. Using this grading rubric, right? Our winning team, Clovis Crush, absolutely, well, they absolutely crushed it, if I can use that terrible pun. They scored a massive 24.5 out of 27. So that's not only a fantastic project that hit all the project requirements, right? But also they added a lot of personal touches throughout, which is really exactly what we love to see and why they took home the gold on this competition. So let's go ahead and take a closer look at how the team scored in each category here. Let's start with one of the more critical pieces of the project, right? The order interface. That's what the end user is going to see. As you can see, Clovis Crush, they nailed this portion of 10 out of 10. All the core functionality was there. A clear and smooth ordering process, nice touch with visualization of the food being made, kind of showing that process. They implemented the Let's Eat button to reset the order screen as it was requested in the project requirements tab, and the real cost updates, real-time cost updates that changed based off of what that user was selecting. But where they really pushed ahead, right, the extra polish they added in here, they included images for the food, as you can see here on this GIF that's playing, right, burger, fries, and shake. Just made the UI a little bit more engaging. Inventory checks were actually baked into the ordering process, so the user couldn't order items that we didn't have inventory for. And this is actually something that I didn't show on that demo, but hopefully it shows here on the GIF if we can get back to it. But essentially, it prevents someone to ordering 1,000 burgers if we don't have the inventory for that, right? Maybe we only have 50 buns left. That user should not be able to order 1,000 burgers, right? And so that's something that they included inside of this UI there. So hopefully we'll see that here in a second. And then just overall, the interface was super clean. Oh, here's that pop-up, right? So there was a pop-up that said, hey, you don't have enough inventory to make X amount of shakes that we had ordered. And so basically just took it off of the order there. But yeah, a really great seamless experience for that end user. Moving on to inventory management now. Once again, it came in strong with a 10 out of 10. You'll start to notice a theme here. Stock core functionality first. The team delivered an editable inventory system that lets users adjust quantities quickly and intuitively, right? That's the key to this page. And here's where they nailed the twist, right? Remember Mara talking about the twist is they had to add the revenue section to this page, right? They successfully added all the revenue items alongside the inventory system, keeping everything aligned visually as well as technically, right, between the sales and the stock perspective. And so some of the extra touches, I mentioned these in our demo, right? Icons that we added next to the inventory rows there on the table. Excellent use of grouping and borders, like we talked about. And everything here is really simple to use, right? That's what we're going for a UI. Alarming, once again, 10 out of 10. They covered all the core functionality here. Alarms were set and visualized on each of the inventory tags, even though we're only saw one of them on the demo. You can see a lot more of them here on a system that's been used a little bit more. You can interact with those alarms, right? The acknowledgement button wasn't disabled. The shelving button was, you had the ability to shelve alarms, all that good stuff. And then of course, the entire alarm the alarm status table took up the entire view there. They also went above and beyond the basics with one really nice touch, right? That clear column, the clear time column that we talked about there. Just additional functionality to their project. Finally, trending. This was another 10% of the overall score. And here's what they got right in terms of core functionality. Initializing with the cup and lid inventory levels on startup of this page. The power chart takes up the whole view, taking advantage of that real estate. And they have the ability to, as you can see on the GIF here, have the ability to remove and add, edit other trends that we are historizing within the system. And then as for bonus points, right, those additional features, I really appreciated them updating the pen name from the default tag path. And so now that we've kind of gone over the core functionality of the app, right, Mara, I'm going to hand it over to you to talk about some of the additional parts of the project and how they are graded and why they are graded, etc. So I'm giving you mouse and keyboard control, and the floor is yours.
All right, thank you, Reese. Wow, there were some features in there that I didn't even see when I was judging. Excellent job. Clovis Crush. Next up, we're going to talk about design and color scheme. This was worth 10% of the score, and our winning team scored high again with a 9 of 10. User experience is really key in any project. Users will often judge your project by how it looks over how it functions. And they can also get lost and frustrated if information is not clear. Good design helps your users understand the interface intuitively. So Reese already showed us the user interface. He showed us that it's very functional and it's also very user intuitive. This section of judging is going to focus on our use of color, graphics, and layouts. So starting with the core functionality, in our judging rubric, we first looked at overall aesthetics, and then we looked for any logos or branding. Color choices are subjective, but we were looking for consistency in our color scheme and the use of branding. We also looked for any intentional design, such as the use of white spaces, alignment in the layout, and readable fonts. For the additional features and highest scores, we looked for things like functional colors, such as showing green for devices that are on. We also looked for icons, and these can be helpful for accessibility, or tooltips can help users understand the interface even better. We also recommend style classes because they help you create a consistent look and feel, and they make your project maintenance easier. Let's take a look at this overall design. So notice we're looking at all 4 screens together, and we see a cohesive color scheme. These screens clearly belong to the same project. Users are going to feel very, very oriented and familiar in here. So consistency not only helps, set your brands, but it keeps your users feeling oriented. What else are we seeing here? We're seeing the use of branding and color. We've got our Crush Cafe logo, and these navigation menu icons follow the logo color scheme. We're also seeing some nice white fonts that contrast nicely with that dark blue background. Next up in our core requirements was this intentional design. So in addition to colors and branding, we are seeing some good use of alignment and spacing throughout the project. The inventory screen is laid out in a tabular format, and we've got larger fonts showing our categories. So we recommend no more than 2 or 3 font variations and sizing, and this project does a good job with that, just reserving those larger fonts where we want to draw the eye. Reese already mentioned we've got some nice grid lines here. We've got some nice separation and spacing. We also, under our additional features, have those functional colors and the icons. We've got a minus quantity icon, and that's red, and the add quantity icon is green. So those colors are pretty intuitive overall. But the icons are also lead to some accessibility. So a colorblind user, and this is more common than you might think. Red-green colorblind is very common. And unfortunately, we see a lot of red and green out there in industry. So we've got our minus sign icon and our plus sign icon, and that's going to help users know immediately what these buttons do. We also have our food items represented by pictures, so it's pretty easy to see what those are. So overall, this scored very high. It covered all requirements and some of the additional features. Some other things they might have used would have been tooltips. That can be helpful that if users hover over a button, they get some more information. This user interface was already intuitive. We didn't feel that more tooltips were necessary. One improvement could have been made by using style classes more. So every view here has that light blue color hard-coded. And your restaurant owner could show up tomorrow and say, hey, designers, I would like a different shade of blue. And our designers would have had to go through every view and replace that hard-coded shade. So just style classes here would have made that project more maintainable. So next up on the judging menu, we have mobile responsiveness. Now, this only counted for 5% of the overall score, but don't get the idea that it's not important. We are seeing more and more that very few real-world projects are designed for only one screen size. So it's really best that you keep responsiveness in mind from the beginning of project design. Again, we scored 10 of 10 here. And we see that this project used flex containers, so those automatically wrap and resize content. Another approach would be to use breakpoints. Breakpoints let you create like a large, small, and medium version of your screens, and then you can show different versions as you resize. So for the core functionality, we just asked that the screens resize on a mobile view, and the project meets that requirement. Everything's resizing nicely. Under additional features, one thing we asked was that the screens are still easy to use. So if I got down to a smaller screen, my buttons are still usable, everything's still really easy to use, so that met that requirement. We also asked for wrapping where needed. So this design didn't require any wrapping, but they did add in a feature that we didn't even mention in the judging rubric. So notice if I shrink this down, that side navigation menu is going to disappear and I get an icon. If I click on that icon, I get the menu, and then I can go ahead and hide that menu again. So this really saves space when you have those smaller screens. It's also user intuitive because we see a lot of this out there in applications. So the project required role-based security, and that made up 10% of the score. Now, our team didn't supply all the passwords, so our judges were not able to test that functionality, and they just, we were missing some of the score. So we scored a 5 of 10 here, but we were able to get into the designer and confirm that all of the functionality was present. So let's take a look at the core functionality in the designer. So not every screen is meant for every user. And in this project, we don't want our customers to see the inventory, trending, or alarming. And only the admins should be able to see our inventory. So the team defined the 3 roles, the administrator, customer, and operator, and they applied the permissions correctly. So here they're using view level permissions, and that's a good solution. So we see the inventory management view here in the designer, and we see that this can only be opened by an administrator. Now that would be enough security, but they did a little more here. You can also disable or hide things. So sometimes we really don't want users to know that there are screens they can't get to, so we hide them. Other times we might want to display things, but we might want to make those things read only for everybody unless they have a certain role. In that case, we might disable editing. So in this case, if we're looking in their designer, they went ahead and they took the menu items, those navigation menu items, and they only made them visible to users in a certain role. So customers wouldn't even have known that those screens that they can't get to existed. All right, last judging category was the twist, and this counted for 10%. Like I said, we didn't throw this in just to be tricky. We've had experience. We know customers always have some new requirements along the way. So it's really best that during your design process, you think of areas where you might need to be flexible or extend your design later. And this is why we are always encouraging that you break code down into functions, that you use reusable objects like reusable views, and we also encourage UDTs or user-defined types because a change can be reflected in all instances of that UDT. So this team scored max points because not only did they accurately track the revenue, but they threw in an additional feature. We only asked for total revenue, but the project delivered revenue broken down by item. So, we found in our experience, you're often on tight deadlines, you don't have time for extras, but sometimes if you're anticipating what your customer needs next, it's going to save you time in the long run. And finally, this design just continued to blend in nicely with the rest of the good design practices on the inventory page. So that, I believe, concludes our judging. I'm going to pass this back over to Reese.
Perfect. Yeah, thanks, Mara. The feature that they added in there for the color blindness, or when you talked about that, it's something that resonates quite well with me. I'm actually one of the 4% of people, is the statistic, that have color blindness. And so adding in those additional visual elements, not only the icons, but textually and color wise, is an important thing to do, especially if it's a project that I'm working on. But anyways, that'll conclude a kind of a rundown of the Student Build-a-Thon project. I honestly hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. We and learned some of the useful things along the way. We are planning on doing this every year, so spread the word. Don't miss out on the Student Build-a-Thon next year. Additionally, if you maybe missed out on this or didn't realize this was going on until maybe today or maybe a month later, you can go and check out the Ignition Exchange. The Ignition Exchange is a place where not only folks here internally at Inductive Automation upload resources, but also folks across our community upload resources. And you can find the Student Build-a-Thon project, all the specifications, the judging criteria, the rubric, the UDTs, everything that the students received at the start of this challenge. If you want to go there and download it and challenge yourself,